Hi everyone, I'm Dave Pollock from HighlineSoftware.com, and in this tutorial we're going to talk about the differences between include versus require, include versus include once, and require versus require once. Let's go ahead and get started. Now we're starting off with a simple web page with a header and a footer, and those are defined in our PHP file named index.php. So here's the header and here's the footer. Now the first thing we're going to do is we're going to insert an ad into our web page so we can generate some revenue. And that ad is named ad.php. Here it is, a simple bogus ad. And so we're going to insert that between the header and the footer. We'll do that by include ad.php. And when I refresh the browser, the ad shows up between the header and the footer. Now, we want to make sure the people looking at our web page see the ad, so we're going to put it in there multiple times. We'll put it in there 4 times just to make sure they see it. And as you can see, the ad shows up several times. It shows up once for each include statement. Now I'm going to show you the difference between include and include once. Change the includes to include once, and when I refresh the browser, only the first ad shows up. And so with include once, the PHP interpreter processes the first include once of ad.php, and it ignores any subsequent includes of that same file. Now let me show you something about error handling. We're going to try to include a file that doesn't exist, bogus.php. It's a bogus file, and when I refresh the browser, we get a couple warnings. If I zoom in on that, you can read it a little better. And so the first warning tells you where the failure occurred. And in index.php on line 26, and the second message tells you where the interpreter looked for the file, and that's defined in the include path right here. So you can see the directories where it looked. It looked in the current directory right there, defined by a period, and then it looked in the pair directory, and it also looked in the PHP unit directory. And there is no file named bogus.php in any of those directories. So it output these warning messages. But as you can see, the script continued to execute after the interpreter encountered this failure to include the file. And so it continued executing the script, and it sent out the footer and the closing body and HTML tags. And this is the difference between include and require. An include will continue executing on failure, whereas a require will terminate. And I'll show you that. When I refresh the screen, and I'll zoom in on that. Now the first message is the warning where the failure occurred, again in index.php, but the second message is a fatal error, and this tells you that the script terminated right there. Failed opening bogus.php, and it again gives you the path. But as you can see, there's no footer displayed on this page because the script terminated. And that is the difference between require and include. Now if you're just including some text or an ad or something that's not essential to the execution of the program, You don't want these ugly error messages appearing on the web page. You want to handle them a little more gracefully. And you could suppress the warning messages by inserting an ampersand in front of the include statement. And so it still tries to include this file, but the warning message is suppressed. And include and require return a true on success and a false on failure. So we can actually handle this failure with an if statement. If include is equivalent to false, then print fail to include bogus.php. And when we refresh the browser, that text is output to the browser. Now you're probably not going to output this warning to the screen. You're probably going to log. Probably going to log some kind of an error message with the line number. So that's how you do the. That's how you can do the error handling. Let me show you that. It prints out that error to the screen. But if we change this to a require, it doesn't print out the error message, and you're not going to be able to log it to a file. So some people actually like to use include for all files because you can handle the failure more gracefully. And if you wanted the script to terminate, then you could put an exit right there, but you would still get the error message. Now let's take a look at another file. This one is called functions.php, and it just has one function in it, get customer ID. And so you might fetch the customer ID from the database, from a cookie, from the cookies, or from session data. And so we're going to do an include functions.php and print customer ID, get customer ID, and if we refresh the browser, as you can see, it output the hard-coded value, the customer ID there. And what happens if we include this file twice? We go ahead and refresh it, and we get a fatal error. Cannot redeclare get customer ID previously declared in functions.php. And so this is where it's absolutely necessary to use include once or require once. And you can see that the script terminated here because it's a fatal error. Now we refresh the browser and everything works normally. Now if you're just working with one file, it's fairly easy to assure that you only have an include once. But what happens, you take out that and go back to add.php, and you can see that functions is also in add.php. And so we'll put an output here. And go back to this other file, and now we'll include add.php, and we'll change this to include functions.php. Now we're including two separate files, but when we refresh the browser, it had output the customer ID right there, but then we get a fatal error because, once again, get customer ID is defined twice. And so whenever you're including functions, classes, definition, use the include once statement instead of or require once. And that eliminates the error message. And so, as if you're including a file that's not critical for the operation of the software, such as including something that's visual, such as text, images, or a code that's not essential to the operation of the software, then use include. But if you're including a file that's essential, such as functions and classes, things like that, then you should use require. And you should almost always use require once so you don't get duplicate function errors. Okay, now let's talk about the include path. If I'm on a machine that doesn't have a debugger, I use a file called debug.class.php, and when I refresh the web page, I get the fatal error. You can't find that. And this file is located in an includes directory. So if I give it the full path, then it finds this file. But there's a better way to do that. We can set the include path. Set include path to be and you could see that there's no error message. But other libraries that you're using also set the include path. And when you set it this way, you're overwriting the other include path. So we can take a look at the settings. You can print and it's get include path. And you can see this is what we looked at earlier. It's looking in the current directory and the parent directory and the PHP unit directory. And so what we want to do, we don't want to replace all that. We want to append our new directory to the include path. So what we can do, start off with get include path. And as you can see, on this system it uses a semicolon. So we put the semicolon in front of our path and refresh the browser, and you can see that we still don't get an error. Now, this is a Windows system. On a Unix system, it's a colon, and you can see why you can't use a colon on a Windows system. And if we do that, we get the error. So the way to get around this, there's a constant defined called path path separator. And on a Windows system, it's going to be a semicolon, and on a Unix system, it's going to be a colon. And by using that, that gets rid of the error message. And if we print this out down here, then we can see that we have our includes path included. Now this is, now we can use the Unix syntax on both Windows and Unix computers. So by doing something like this, it's more portable. And as you can see, it still works. And that's the end of this tutorial. I hope you found the information useful. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me at dave@highlinesoftware.com. That's dave@highlinesoftware.com. See you next time.